when realization takes you back into, in a new way, in a different way, back into the suffering that you had to wake up from in the first place, do you resist that? Or do you explore it and learn? Intuition is something I try to encourage people to attune to cultivate. But it's not really something you cultivate as much as it's something you become more and more aware of as realization unfolds. The intuition I'm talking about, first of all, just to be clear, has nothing to do with your thoughts. It has nothing to do with understanding in a conceptual way. And that in and of itself can take some time for people to realize what that means, because we can get up in our head about intuition meaning like, what should I do with my life? What does my life mean? Who am I in some way that I could describe to myself or others? What is my purpose? These are not what I mean by intuition. Those may be valuable ways of thinking or looking at your life in another context, but in this context, it's just not what I'm talking about. So then, what is intuition? Well, it's like porn. You know it when you feel it. You know it when you see it. But it may be hard to describe. It's like you just know that that's what it is. It's an insight that can't be described because it's too simple, too close, too obvious. And I think, as for most people, I think they would say, I would agree, but I don't know for sure, as realization deepens, it becomes more obvious what that intuition is. And when it comes to practice, which really that's the whole point of intuition, when it comes to practice, it shows you where to look. It shows you where you need to go. It shows you what you need to address. It shows you what's holding. It shows you what's fixating. It shows you what's sticking. It shows you what feels maybe uncomfortable, but still needing to be addressed. It shows you where reactivity is. It shows you how to be authentic. It shows you how to be honest with yourself about what you're not wanting to look at or not wanting to address. So it's a sort of marker of authenticity, I suppose, self-authenticity. What's the most important thing now? What is the most important thing to address right now? What is the most important thing to come into contact with right now? And as I say those words, if you have this orientation to that intuition, you may feel it moving inside. You may feel your attention moving to something, to some sensation, some fixation, some experience. Now, if it's moving into your mind, if it's moving into your thoughts, and you're trying to analyze what I'm saying, that's okay. That's really where the types of meditation I was talking about a couple of days ago, unbound consciousness, it's where they really come in handy. Because once this becomes intellectual, once anything becomes intellectual, it becomes very dualistic, right? Once we're thinking about something as such, then the sense of being a thinker, the sense of that which we're thinking about or contemplating are already dualistic. And that's where confusion begins and remains. So as long as there's identification with thoughts, there's always going to be some degree of confusion. Confusion about the great matter, and just confusion about simple matters as well. So if I heard, it was like a secondhand quote, but I think someone told me that Suzuki Roshi at one point said, the ego is like a bull So what you want to do is give it a very big pasture to roam around in. And that's a pretty good, I don't know what he was talking about, but maybe something like this. That's a pretty good pointer to this experience or process or practice of what I talk about when I say unbound consciousness. It's to open that aperture so wide that anything that is stirring in the mind, anything is stirring in thoughts or consciousness is immediately noticed. And it's not noticed in a dualistic way, it's noticed in a way of totality, of inclusiveness of all of consciousness, of that entire ocean of being, that ocean of knowingness that requires no object of thought to be known, because it's always known, and it incorporates all knowing. It also incorporates all ignorance. It incorporates all thought forms. It incorporates everything you've ever thought about the world or yourself, or any fragment of any thought, any problem, any apparent solution, any gain or loss. All of it is just structured in this vast ocean of consciousness, right? So to learn to remain in that will settle that dualistic mind. And when dualistic mind is settled enough, then there will often be a shift in identity, however that happens. It can happen through a one-pointed approach, as I described maybe yesterday, which feels a little different. That's a little bit more like you become so focused down to one point that that sense of the subject and object in consciousness, the sense of the thinker, the seeker, and what it seems to be thinking about or seeking have been forgotten, actually. They've been completely just forgotten because of the one-pointed approach, the one-pointed focus of all of your will and consciousness. Different approach, same result. There'll be a sudden recognition of what this ocean of consciousness feels like, and that it is not an experience, but it is the primary position, as primary as you can get, while there still is the sense of holding a position of any kind, and that all experiences come and go within this, all thoughts come and go within this, all appearances in the mind come and go within this. Once you have that equanimity, once you know that equanimity of consciousness, then the intuition will start becoming more obvious. The subtle becomes more interesting than the gross. The intuitive becomes more interesting than the conceptual. And then you can feel it. You can feel where it's pointing you. Where is it pointing you? Where is it pointing you right now? And it's different all the time. Right now, it might be pointing you to an emotion. It might be pointing to sadness or grief or fear. It might be pointing you to helplessness. It might be pointing you to just some energetic blockage or an energetic channel. And as your attention moves into that space, it opens and something shifts and changes and the energy starts moving through and you start having Kundalini experiences. It can be anything. But there is something that knows where to orient. There's something that knows where to find the next fixation that needs to be addressed if this is going to continue to propagate this realization. Also, now it doesn't mean that you'll be in touch with that intuition 24/7 or you'll always have your attention on it or something, but it will be available. And that's one of the values of meditation, really, is if you calm the mind enough, calm the body enough, then all of a sudden the subtle becomes much more obvious and intuitively interesting, right? It's your intuition. So now we follow it and just go where it takes us every second. It becomes a very enjoyable exploration. Also, if you know what this means and the intuition is there and clear for you a lot of the time or some of the time, but in a given moment it's not obvious where that thread is or where that intuition is pointing, then you can just ask a question. What is my deepest intuition right now? What needs the most attention right now in my experience? And just let it go there immediately. And now, again, if you're thinking about it like, oh, I don't know, is it this or that? Or That's not quite it. It's okay. Maybe more down the body. Try more into the physicality. The more dense energetics of the apparent form. So where's your intuition pointing you? And it may not even be a direction at some point. It may be everything. Maybe the radiant totality of all of this. It may take you to impossible places, impossible experiences that are beyond the structure of this physicality, this physical world. Beyond the relative laws that govern our experience here. Don't be surprised if it takes you beyond all of that, because it will. And that can be tremendously enjoyable, releasing, sublime, indescribable. And it also might just take you into some emotional density. You never know. And it's okay if it does, because that's where your intuition is showing you the most attention is needed right now. And this part of things, this unpredictability about where you're going to be pointed as realization unfolds, is one of the most challenging aspects of realization for many people to get used to. It's where you will find resistance patterns immediately, if there are any left in this space. Because it is unpredictable. It's not, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't follow anything to do with the cognitive apparatus. So if you have a map that's being held onto in any way, that this will challenge that. It won't feel good. If the mind is saying, I'd rather be doing blank, then that can set up a lot of tension, reactivity, frustration. But the good news is that the information is there for you. It's in the mind. Look and see what the thoughts are saying, if they're saying something. Look and see if there's tension in that space. If there is, remind yourself of that infinite being directly through experience. And when the mind is calm, let your intuition take you again wherever it takes you. One of the reasons I structure these retreats, I don't do it on all retreats, but these smaller retreats as semi-silent retreats, is because we have the opportunity to go from deep silence samadhi to interacting, talking, playing around, doing things, structured activities. And that can be challenging at first, for sure, for people who aren't used to it. It can be jarring. But it's very purposeful, actually. There's a reason I do that. Because that's how life is. And that's how this is. Emptiness is infinitely flexible. It doesn't hold preference for silence over sound or movement, stillness over movement. There's the quote, I don't think I have it really memorized, but there's a quote about when you prefer silence over sound, stillness over movement, that's the time to apply effort. And when in the depths of samadhi you topple that sense of silence, This experience surpasses quietistic meditation by 1,000,000 billion times. So how do you know silence from sound? How do you know movement from stillness? Where's that distinction arising? Let your intuition take you there. See if that is a distinction, if it is real. Is there really silence without sound? Is there movement without stillness? Are they really temporally separated? Or is that just our mind trying to hold on to one, rejecting the other? When realization takes you back into, in a new way, in a different way, back into the suffering that you had to wake up from in the first place, do you resist that? Or do you explore it and learn? And ask yourself the question, is there a difference between samsara and nirvana? Is there a difference between liberation and suffering? Where's that distinction held? Where's that distinction formed? Does it actually exist? So your intuition can take you all kinds of fun and exciting places, and some very strange places, and painful places. But one thing is, I would say, pretty consistent, and that is, the more you trust it, the more you learn to follow where it's taking you, regardless of what you want to be happening right now. The more freedom will be illuminated. Also, the more, on a more subjective scale, the more you'll realize your bandwidth for experience is beyond what you thought it was. But that's because of the non-holding. It's because of the non-containing. You're not trying to contain experience and define experience and have experience and rid yourself of experience, of any experience. When that containing and management stops, experience is just very different. Experience itself is very different. Emotion is different. You can probably identify it, but it's so subtle, and there's no problem there, and it's not about anyone, and it's not held, and it's not problematic. It just moves through so fluidly. Everything moves through fluidly. Pain, pleasure, all of these. And so then things soften a lot. It's not numbness, it's more of penetration, deep penetration, thoroughgoing penetration of everything. In retrospect, it was always the holding back that was causing all of the suffering, all the pain, all the problems. It was the holding back, which we could call resistance. We could call it aversion. And when that's not happening, the penetration is ongoing, unfettered, unhindered. And with that, unhindered penetration, we realize boundless clarity, no boundaries, and that is clarity. At every level, in every direction. In all spaces, all times. Comes with a deepening trust in all the eventualities of life, the relative eventualities. And then the more we trust the relative, the more we are able to find and live where relative and absolute are truly in a dance. They are interpenetrated. Not holding on to the absolute is challenging. It can be challenging for a while because it's so freeing for many people. Not for everybody, but it's a very freeing realization. It's a deep realization. But it can go deeper. And it's not in the direction you think if you're holding on to the absolute. The deepening is into the relative, back into the relative. And that's even a stage, a phase, when the relative and absolute are really interpenetrated, ongoing, such that they become thoroughly indistinguishable. That's a whole different kind of realization. There's nowhere you cannot go. There's nothing missing. There's nothing overlooked. And then the relative world shapes itself in ways that you can't predict. It's not based on some kind of intention of yours or anything, but they're pretty surprising, astounding. And the relative realignment of you, the relative person that you are, is also surprising. Things that you thought were the biggest fear of your life turn out to be the biggest benefit, perhaps, or the one thing you haven't wanted to accept for so long turns out to be the most interesting place, the most intimate place, accessible. All of this is available through following our intuition. And I know, I already know that like this video is going to be on YouTube, right? And so I will get comments. You never defined intuition. The whole video, you never said what it was, right? Have an awakening and then we'll have a different kind of conversation. But that's what happens. The mind gets a hold of this and it's like, is it this or is it that? It's like, if you're asking the question, what is it? I need a definition for it. You know who you are. You're making the comment right now. Yeah. If you need a definition for it, if you're frustrated because you're not hearing a definition, then go back to the beginning and listen to the part I said about thought and the mind, because this is not about thought and the mind. But that can be a very sticky and difficult place to get out of until awakening. That's why I always push for that first awakening or encourage it, because if that doesn't happen, then that mind's going to bind you back and it's going to be like, no, what is it? You never said what it was. I need to know what it is. You don't need to know what it is. You don't know anything you think you know already. You need to take that backward step, you know? And if it's unclear, but you're not necessarily stuck up in your head about this, but it's like, where is that intuition? Or I think I know. Just be wide open. Become still through and through. Don't make anything. These are the words of my Zen teacher. Just sit there and don't make anything. And then just notice where your attention's called. That's it. Maybe the subtlest experience at first. But keep practicing in this way. keep attuning to it, or surrendering. Surrendering means just show me what I need to see. Show me what I need to feel, please. I'm a disaster. I get in my head. I don't know what's good for me. I self-sabotage. All that's true. And I'm open to just seeing where I need to be pointed right now, what I need to feel, what I need to experience, what's the most true for me right now. That's surrender. That works as well. Kenny always follows his intuition, 100% of the time. He just knows what to do, right? You good boy. Yeah. His intuition is 90% scent. Smells. Okay.